This is CGTN, China Global Television Network. This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
China's legislature and top political advisory body continues meetings in Beijing. South African authorities applaud the progress in rolling out vaccinations across the country. And at least 20 killed by a suicide car bomb near a restaurant in Somalia's capital. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up over the next hour. In business, Economic Commission for Africa supports 40 countries to develop their continental free trade area strategies. And in sports, Tunisian football clubs look for alternative ways to raise revenue during the pandemic cash crunch. It is the third day of this year's two sessions, China's biggest political event of the year. The country's legislature, the National People's Congress, and its top political advisory body, the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, are continuing their meetings in Beijing today. They have been discussing the government work report, which Chinese Premier Li Keqiang delivered yesterday. In the afternoon, they will turn their attention to the draft outline of China's 14th five-year plan, a blueprint for economic and social development until 2026, as well as the country's long-term goals for 2035. Well, President Xi Jinping has called on Inner Mongolia to play a bigger part in China's development. The Chinese leader was speaking during a deliberation with deputies from the Northern Autonomous Region. Views were exchanged on a wide range of topics, including modern agriculture, rural vitalization, and the country's new development philosophy. President Xi called on the deputies to promote smart and green development, to enhance capabilities in science and technology, and to improve the region's business environment. He urged them to turn Inner Mongolia into a national base for key energy and strategic resources and a production base for agriculture and animal husbandry. The president said Inner Mongolia had a part to play in China's new development paradigm of dual circulation, in which the domestic and overseas markets reinforce each other with the domestic market as the mainstay. He also urged the deputies to uphold Inner Mongolia's tradition of ethnic unity. Well, CGTN's Zheng Yibin has more on the Chinese leaders' meeting with the delegation from Inner Mongolia.
A lot of people would ask why President Xi Jinping would join discussions with a delegation from the Inner Mongolia. That's because he's also a member of this delegation. He was elected 3 years ago by the People's Congress of the Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region as a deputy to the 13th National People's Congress. Inner Mongolia is in northern China, extending about 2,400 kilometers from the country's northeast to the northwest. Its ecological system is typical, and it's fragile and menaced by the desert. In previous annual NPC sessions, we reported some workers and experts on desertification control, and we know how it is important to keep green development here and promote the experiences to other places in China. Therefore, the region and other places had similar difficulties in finally eradicating extreme poverty, and now it faces challenges in consolidating the results of poverty alleviation and pushing for rural revitalization. This is also an epitome of many places in China. So discussions in this delegation on Friday centers on ecological protection. President Xi himself underlined the need to fully understand and implement the new development philosophy featuring innovative, coordinated, green, open, and shared growth. She called for the region to develop advantageous industries to increase people's incomes and prevent those who have been lifted out of poverty from becoming poor again.
Well, the National People's Congress has started deliberating changing Hong Kong's election system. Senior Chinese lawmaker Wang Chen said the existing system has loopholes and deficiencies which led to the unrest in 2019. He said the election committee of the Special Administrative Region would be overhauled to ensure that patriots govern Hong Kong. He said the change is crucial to upholding the one country, two systems.
First, fully and accurately implement the policy of one country, two systems, under which the people of Hong Kong administer Hong Kong with a high degree of autonomy. It is imperative to uphold and improve the system and institutions of one country, two systems, and ensure the administration of Hong Kong by Hong Kong people with patriots as the main body.
Well, innovation and high-quality development are expected to be key points of China's upcoming 5-year plan and its longer-term goals. CGTN reporter Su Yuting spoke about it with NPC Deputy Dong Mingzhu, who is a chairwoman of a leading air conditioning manufacturer in China. She said companies cannot survive without a highly talented team and solid research and development.
Innovation is a key word you always emphasize. Amid the COVID-19 pandemic, what do you think the Chinese enterprises should do to achieve high-quality development through technological innovation?
总书记也说了，抗击疫情要靠科技。
General Secretary Xi Jinping said that fighting the pandemic depends on science and technology. So green electric appliances have made a lot of products related to anti-pandemic efforts, such as our new coronavirus sterilizer and air purifier, our disinfectant producing machine. We have also developed mask production equipment and independently developed mobile nucleic acid detection vehicles. We have made our own contribution to the fight against COVID-19. So I think an enterprise must remember its mission in the process of development. I think the vitality of an enterprise lies in innovation. The vitality of an enterprise is to use science to continuously create new technologies. That's a real enterprise with social responsibility.
Standard is also another keyword in your motions and suggestions this year. Why is it important to implement Chinese standards and Chinese certifications in the domestic market?
我们发现中国的制造业，特别我们自己亲身经历了，我们开发出了很多都是。
We found that China's manufacturing industry has developed and invented a lot of technologies, which are original globally, but there are no standards. I feel that today, our past standards can no longer meet the requirements of enterprises that want to innovate independently. So we hope that the country will speed up the process of establishing standards and have a green channel for our innovative technology to implement a unified standard for products, so as to promote the rapid development of enterprises. We feel a lot, especially in the field of air conditioning. We have created a lot of technology, which is far ahead of others globally. For example, when we talk about environmental protection and green energy, GREE's R&D is the technology of photovoltaic air conditioning and integrated whole-house intelligent control. But because these products have just been invented, there is no standard yet. So we also need it very much. This kind of technical standard for many of our enterprises is already ahead of international standards. But we still use some so-called international standards in the Chinese market. So I think we should have an organization in China with our own standards and certifications, so that when a product enters the Chinese market, it can be verified to be a qualified product according to Chinese standards.
During the 14th Five-Year Plan, how will China's manufacturing industry promote internationalization for going global?
“十四五”开局之年，对我们来说，应该是一个新的起点。
The first year of the 14th Five-Year Plan should be a new starting point for us. So, in this first year, I think we should pay more attention to science and technology, and use science and technology to drive development. So what does technology depend on? It depends on talent. I think we should increase the cultivation of independent talent. China is already a big manufacturing country, but it does not have the ability to train talent, so it's not really internationalized. I think at the beginning of the 14th Five-Year Plan, for the manufacturing industry, we should pay more attention to the upgrading of products' quality and technology, and at the same time, we should look for higher standards to cultivate independent talent. Gree Electric Appliances has thousands of R&D personnel, but we think it is far from enough. We take General Secretary Xi's view that the people and health are paramount. When it comes to the manufacturing industry, the R&D of some products and technologies should focus on these words as the development direction. You need to have a lot of talent to continuously innovate new technologies from generation to generation to improve the quality of our lives.
Well, for more on this, we can now speak to Patrick Bond, who is a professor at the University of the Western Cape School of Government, for more analysis. He joins us from Durban, South Africa. Professor Bond, how is China helping developing countries or poor countries, especially in Africa, fight poverty?
Well, you know, at the moment, the critical question is ending the threat of COVID-19. So the vaccines would obviously be not just the provision of vaccines, but treatment, the ability of Chinese health workers to show extraordinary courage and example. That, in a way, is a poverty fighting measure on the health front. And then on the bigger macro question, will there be resources in African governments to try to help people through this terrible crisis that continues here? And that's the question of the debt, the foreign debt. And there, China's been pretty good with the G20, but could be better. So debt relief, extensions, working with the African Union. Now, many of the loans would have helped Africa develop. But there are also loans that are so-called odious. They were involved with, say, corrupt practitioners. In this country, Transnet and Eskom are at billions from China. And we're hoping that the odious debt, the unfair debt for corruption in mega projects will be also addressed by that debt. Maybe it will also be the case for debt cancellation, as some in Africa, the activists and one or two heads of state have called for.
And Professor Bond, how then is China also helping African countries develop their economies?
Well, that is indeed whether the loans that were made finance genuine investment. As you know, many of the Western institutions are throwing money at problems, but the real economy isn't really in the picture. And you can see that in the bubbly stock markets and financial markets. So I do appreciate that usually the loans from China are tied to actual infrastructural expansions, and that is either development, depending on whether it's for ordinary people, it helps them. You know, there's a rail line from Mombasa to Nairobi, and ordinary people can get onto it. It's reasonably priced. The debt on that is expensive, of course. But many of the other projects are not really for development. They maldevelop, or they help for only extractive industries. And that's one of the big questions, whether Chinese authorities can recognize which infrastructure really helps and which is simply extractivism that helps the multinational corporates that do the extraction. A lot of Chinese infrastructure investment, unfortunately, still falls into that category. So hopefully that can be addressed in future rounds of infrastructure development.
And finally, Professor Bond, the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference will today discuss the draft outline of China's 14th Five-Year Plan. That's a blueprint for economic and social development until 2026, as well as the country's long-term goals for 2035. What do you see China doing well that then Africa can learn to develop?
Oh, well, look, I would go back to 1949 when the Chinese people overthrew a repressive government and inspired and then started a solidarity between the Chinese government and progressive post-colonial governments. You know, the Tanzania, Zambia railway as a sort of concrete reflection. And again, this government in China has shown that it can take strong action against, for example, illicit financial flows. It put on exchange controls again and again. And that is what we need to do on this continent. We have a terrible problem of big corporates looting through illicit financial flows. So those would be some of my original lessons from the strength of the Chinese government. But the next period has to be one of a transition from fossil fuels to solar. And that's again where the Chinese government could lead us. They don't necessarily do it on a complete cost recovery basis, which would be way too expensive for many Africans, but they're doing creative subsidies. And of course, we have to get off coal, off oil and gas if the Chinese people, the African people, will survive into the next century. So if we can have more cooperation where China takes a stronger stance in this next period of making these just transitions, these conversions, we'll have so much to learn from and to be grateful from.
All right, Professor Bond, thank you very much for that. Professor Patrick Bond with the University of the Western Cape School of Government joining us live there from South Africa. Moving on, more than half of the $1 billion of foreign direct investment inflows reported in the first half of 2020 in Ethiopia came from Chinese-related activities. That's according to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. CGTN's Coleto Anjohi looks at how the Sino-Ethiopian relationship continues to grow through key investments.
The Eastern Industry Zone is one of the main hubs for manufacturing, mainly for export. Over 100 companies have set up operations at this park, about 30 kilometers from the capital, Addis Ababa. More than 80 are Chinese businesses.
Our Eastern Industry Park is established on 2018, and the total area is 5 square kilometer. And for the first phase is 2.33 square kilometer, which is we just visit all of these factories.
The park offers employment to over 15,000 locals, with some expatriates from China. The connection of industrial parks corridor around the country is meant to be this standard gauge railway. It was partly funded by the Export-Import Bank of China to a tune of $2.9 billion.
There are some companies, they use the railway already, but what they give us feedback is like the cost is really reduced.
It is also a link between Ethiopia and Djibouti port in Djibouti. Gideon Jalata, an expert in China-Africa relations, says that the railway project is yet to fully realize its expectation on cargo transportation.
The government has to expedite in creating linkage with industrial parks. Not only that, the railway, when it reaches the port of Djibouti, like some 30 kilometers, there are some more lines because the railway is expected to go too deep into the harbor and the lift, goods and come. That linkage was expected to be built by the French company, so it was not built yet.
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government has set out a 10-year plan to guide economic reforms. Gideon says this still has openings for more Chinese investment.
As you know, the government of Abiy Ahmed is coming up with huge projects, beautification of Addis, as well as there are some selected places for further tourist attraction across the country. 4 places were identified, I think. So along that and the other projects, the role of China is still needed. So I would believe that the role of China will increase in Ethiopia and it won't decrease.
The Chinese ambassador to Ethiopia says even with the pandemic pushing countries to prioritize the health sector, extra attention needs to be given to the cooperation between the two countries. Beijing is pledging to work closely with Ethiopia on matters of public health, economic reopening, and ensuring that people's livelihoods go back to normal after the pandemic. And Ethiopia is working to create more ease of doing business so that investment in industrial parks like this can fast blossom to full expectation of the investors. Coleto Anjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And staying in the country, members of Ethiopia's Prosperity Party have praised China's commitment to multilateralism. In particular, they noted China's adherence to open cooperation. Both China and Ethiopia have a long history of supporting each other. The party's head of public and international relations sent out his best wishes as the 2 sessions are currently taking place in China.
Yes, 2021 is a very historical year for the Chinese people. And Chinese dream has come true, and also a significant proportion of the Chinese people are now pulled out of poverty, And the role of the CPC is very significant. And CPC paid a price to pull the Chinese people out of poverty, and also provided a lesson to the world population. And also, I'm sure you will achieve the second phase of your dream by 2049, and we will see strongest, prosperous, and modern China.
Well, two South African experts on China say that the country has proven to be a global leader in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. They were reacting to the report given by the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
China's biggest political gathering kicked off on Thursday with the top advisory body, the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, or CPPCC, holding its meeting. The National People's Congress is also underway. The two sessions, amongst other things, mark the beginning of China's new 5-year plan. It's a plan that forms the cornerstone of China's economic governance. The plan also sets out the social and environmental aspirations and targets for the country. The country's annual top political event comes at a time when the world is grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic. According to information presented by the CPPCC at the conference, the advisory body was active in the fight against COVID-19 and engaged organizations across the country to combat the pandemic.
There is no doubt that China has been able to lead the world in dealing with the pandemic and turn it around and see opportunities in a crisis. I think that's one of the major achievements, that we have seen. The spread of the disease has been put on hold. We have seen scientific developments within the health sector, the development of vaccines, the usage of technology in how to reach people and manage the movement of people around the country and abroad. So these are some of the major achievements.
With the shutdowns that were restricted, China had to be innovative. That is why through its technology, through its service industry, it managed to grow at a rate of 2.3, which means that China last year was the only big economy in the world to actually achieve positive growth. So the CPC, the Chinese Communist Party, saw an opportunity in bolstering its innovation, in bolstering its service industry, and in bolstering its technology. So that was the opportunity from the danger that was COVID-19.
It was also announced at the conference that China has achieved an all-round victory in the fight against poverty.
To achieve some of their mission, particularly of poverty alleviation, President Xi Jinping has managed and also announced that China has been able to eliminate the absolute poverty in the country. So these are some of the areas, particularly for Africa, to emulate how best to work with communities on the ground.
The country will also be celebrating the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party of China. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Now, the COVID-19 vaccination program in South Africa has been going on since mid-February after an initial hiccup when the AstraZeneca vaccine was replaced by the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. In a briefing on Friday, authorities hailed the progress made in inoculating people so far. CGTN's Angelo Coppola has more details.
The first phase of the program involves vaccinating the country's more than 1 million healthcare workers. It got off to a slow start.
Because we're doing this early access program under research conditions, it requires that we validate the vaccination process and that people get signed and informed consent. And that does slow down the process. In a situation where a vaccine is registered in the country, you don't have to go through all these hurdles.
The approval process for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine hasn't been finalized in South Africa yet.
A few days ago, we heard that the J&J has received emergency use authorization with the FDA and is going through a whole process of authorizations in Europe. To date, the vaccine hasn't been registered in South Africa, and so therefore the only way you can use a vaccine in country is either through a Section 21, which means that the vaccine is registered somewhere else and you're allowed to use it because it's been registered somewhere else, or you have to do it under what we do phase 3B clinical trial conditions.
South Africa is also relying on the Pfizer vaccine to inoculate people in the country.
I believe the Section 21 access program for Pfizer is imminent, and that soon we'll be able to have the Section 21, which allows then the country to procure the vaccines and distribute it. So we hope that the Section 21 will occur, that the vaccines will come into the country, and that we'll start to be able to use the Pfizer vaccine towards to a kind of end of March, early April.
The first phase of the vaccination program is picking up pace, and once approvals for the two main vaccines have been obtained, the mass vaccination campaign can begin.
The capacity of the government to be able to provide vaccines in phase 2 and phase 3 of this program has been called into question, and that's where clinics like this in the private sector might be called into use. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, Nigeria's top leaders are set to receive their COVID-19 vaccinations on live TV. President Muhammadu Buhari and his Deputy Vice President Yemi Osinbajo will receive the doses on Saturday. They hope to increase public confidence in the vaccines. On Friday, the COVID-19 vaccination campaign kicked off with frontline health workers and support staff receiving the treatment. Well, let's get more on that. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam joins us on the phone from Abuja, Nigeria for more. Kelechi, what is the latest on the COVID-19 vaccinations, and has the president now been vaccinated?
Well, hi, Mahia. Since the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine landed in Nigeria earlier this week, frontline health workers are being prioritized to receive a vaccine. They started off in Abuja, the nation's capital, yesterday, and they're continuing with other health workers. Well, right about now, preparations are ongoing for the President, Muhammadu Buhari, and his vice, Yemi Osinbajo, to take the vaccines at the presidential villa. Now, there are strict restrictions. Only a few cameramen are allowed in there in order to observe the COVID-19 protocols. But we're made to understand that the vaccines would be administered at about noon local time to the president and his vice. Thereafter, the vaccines would be distributed to states that have met the requirements for storage. There are also, thereafter also, we have frontline workers in the states. They will be given priority to receive the vaccines, and then old people and people with underlying health conditions are next on the priority list. For now, there's a designated link online where citizens have begun registration, and that's how the rollout plan would happen, Maya.
And Kelechi, different countries are using more than 2 types of vaccines. What is Nigeria using now, and what plans do they have for acquiring more?
Well, for now, Nigeria is only using the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine that's been approved by the World Health Organization and certified by the country's Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control. But the government had mentioned earlier that it's hoping to get at least 50 million doses of 3 other types of vaccines by April, and they'll get that through the African Union, Mahia.
And Kelechi, what is the purpose then of President Buhari leading this campaign by example?
Oh, well, I'll tell you that unlike in other countries where presidents campaign, well, that's not the case here in Nigeria. The campaign is being led by the country's health minister through its National Primary Health Care Development Agency. Now, quite a number of people have been skeptical about taking the vaccines because of various stories of side effects, from blindness to fevers to death even, all of which have not yet been independently verified. But what this does is that with the president taking the vaccine today, it would definitely kind of boost the confidence of the people, and perhaps more people would be convinced to register and receive the vaccine.
All right, Kelechi, thank you very much for your insights there. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam joining us on the phone from Abuja, Nigeria. Meanwhile, Uganda has received its first consignment of the AstraZeneca vaccine from the COVAX facility. The country plans to vaccinate about 21 million people, as CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga now reports.
These are Uganda's first doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. The consignment has a total of 864,000 doses. Under the COVAX program, the country is set to receive more than 3.5 million.
Uganda is fully prepared to launch and start utilizing the vaccines starting on the 10th of March 2021.
The arrival of the vaccines has been welcomed by the public.
I'm very excited, and I'm happy that finally we are going to get the medicine. We don't want to lose so many people like we used to lose in 2020. So if the vaccine comes, I'm ready to receive mine too, and my family, and also my friends too.
But not everyone is eligible for vaccination. Priority will be given to frontline health workers, security personnel, teachers, the elderly, and those with underlying health conditions. In a few days, the health ministry will be rolling out the jabs across the country, but some rights activists have taken the government to court for excluding some sections of the population. The Initiative for Social and Economic Rights is pushing for equitable treatment for all.
We think this is discriminatory, it's unfair, it's irrational that the Ministry of Health has decided to tag the acquisition of the COVID-19 vaccine to presentation of a national identification card or a national identification number, and yet so many Ugandans are going to be excluded. So that's the issue that has brought us to court.
Uganda has ordered a further 18 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. The country has so far recorded over 40,000 COVID-19 cases and more than 300 deaths. But as it rolls out the inoculation program, the government is encouraging Ugandans to maintain mask wearing and washing hands even after vaccination. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Stay with us here on Africa Live. Here's what's still to come on the program. At least 20 killed by a suicide car bomb near a restaurant in Somalia's capital. And protests escalate in Senegal over the arrest of an opposition leader.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden, Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's turn to Somalia now. At least 20 people have been killed and 30 others wounded in a suicide car bomb attack. The incident is said to have occurred just outside Lul Yamani restaurant near the country's capital in Mogadishu. According to state-owned media reports, the blast sent plumes of smoke into the sky, triggering gunfire. Somalia's state-controlled Radio Mogadishu has also reported cases of destruction of property in the area. Islamist group Al-Shabaab is known to frequently carry out such bombings in Somalia. This is part of the group's campaign to topple the Horn of African country's central government and establish its own rule in the nation.
10 people have died and 30 others injured, security forces have reported, when a suicide tuk-tuk full of explosives detonated at the front gate of Lul Yaman restaurant. This is the initial report we have.
Let's turn to Senegal, where protests have left at least 4 people dead. This is according to the country's interior minister. Protesters clashed with security forces on Thursday following the arrest of a popular opposition figure, Ousmane Sonko. Astatal has more.
The protests kicked off across Dakar and parts of Senegal following the arrest of Ousmane Sonko. He was heading to court to face charges of rape. The opposition leader stands accused of raping an employee of a massage parlor. While Sonko admits he sought a massage for a bad back, he denies the charges. He alleges that the charges are part of a plan by President Macky Sall to sideline him politically, a sentiment echoed by his supporters.
What is happening here in Senegal is democracy being trampled. President Macky Sall, we put our trust in him on 23rd June. We all fought, all of us, for him to come to power. And today, once in power, he is playing the same game as all African presidents.
The government denies these accusations and frames Sonko's actions in a different light. In addition to charges of rape, he now faces a charge of disturbing public order.
On the other hand, Ousmane Sonko has, through repeated messages, issued calls to violence, insurrection, and the weakening of the authority of the state. These acts of provocation, unprecedented and without parallel, with the support of identified occult forces, provoked violent demonstrations in several neighborhoods of the capital and in other localities of the country.
Protesters damaged several buildings, with businesses on Friday shuttering in fear of additional protest. Astatal, CGTN.
To Guinea now, where authorities are battling to contain 2 epidemics, the Ebola outbreak and the COVID-19 pandemic. And as CGTN's Astatal reports, a United Nations team in the country has encountered serious challenges as it tries to vaccinate residents against Ebola.
The spread of the coronavirus in Guinea has taken a huge toll on the West African nation's economy. According to the United Nations resident coordinator in Guinea, Vincent Martin, there have been a lot of conspiracy theories about the disease. This, he says, has caused residents to have a lot of tension and fear towards the disease.
There is still anxiety, there is still resistance to the understanding really the epidemiological situation. Is this true? I mean, like for COVID, you have got all these conspiracy theories. And so there are a lot of tensions and reluctancy to really engage and fear for this disease. So it's very important to strengthen and ramp up this community engagement, work with anthropologists, and making sure that all the right messages come across the population so that people are part of the surveillance system. When there is a suspicion, they report back to the health authorities, and we don't miss any contacts because contact tracing is absolutely critical. With the fatigue of the population, respecting social distanciation and so on and so forth, we can see that the number of cases is rising.
Just as health agencies in the country tried to contain the new disease, another challenge arose. Guinea reported a new Ebola outbreak. The country last reported an outbreak of the disease in 2016.
There was no vaccine at the time of the 2014 outbreak. Now there is a vaccine which is available. And the vaccine, we were able to deliver the vaccine in 9 days after the notification of the disease. That is to say, WHO, which is on the front line to address this epidemic situation, mobilized the stock that was available, and 11,000 doses arrived just 9 days after the notification of the outbreak, and the vaccination has started. And we have 1,544 people who have been vaccinated so far in the epicenter of the disease.
The latest outbreak in Guinea has made neighboring nations start preparations to tackle the disease in case of a possible resurgence. As Guinea faces a new Ebola outbreak, so does the DRC. The Democratic Republic of Congo held about 8,000 vaccine doses for emergency use after its last outbreak in 2020. The nation has already begun to distribute them in various parts of the country. Astatal, CGTN.
Right, well, here's what's coming up on Africa Live Business. The Economic Commission for Africa supports 40 countries to develop their continental free trade area strategies. And concerns raised in South Africa that a new minimum wage could lead to the loss of 4,000 jobs.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
The Economic Commission for Africa last week held its 28th quarterly African ambassadors briefing. The Commission briefed the diplomats on the status of AFCFTA following the start of trading on January 2021. The ECA says it's currently supporting 40 countries to develop their strategies for the free trade area. So far, 11 countries have validated their AFCFTA strategies, and 7 are being supported with the implementation of specific interventions. The AFCFTA is the world's largest free trade area. It connects 1.3 billion people across 55 countries with a combined GDP valued at $3.4 trillion. Analysts say it has the potential to lift 30 million people out of extreme poverty and to raise the incomes of 68 million others who live on less than $5 a day. Meanwhile, Agri-SA, a federation of agricultural organizations, has warned that the national minimum wage of about $1.5 per hour, which came into effect on Monday, could result in the loss of more than 4,000 jobs in the agricultural sector. Angelo Coppola picks up the story.
The agricultural sector continues to operate during the COVID-19 lockdown. It contributes about 3% to GDP. Around 900,000 people are employed in the sector, and it provides much needed food security for the country. The minimum wage increase may affect this.
Farmers will obviously look at ways and means, one, to cut down on labor cost. In other words, they will look at mechanization as an option, or they will reduce the number of workers. And the only way that you can actually reduce numbers if you close down certain parts of your agricultural business.
The agricultural sector covers a wide spectrum of subsectors, some of which don't need a lot of workers. But there are sectors like deciduous fruits, table grapes and wool, which do require workers.
And that's where a national minimum wage can have a serious impact. One, on obviously on the profitability of a commercial farmer, And secondly, also on the possibility of creating more jobs. And at the end of the day, it's workers that suffer as a result of a national minimum wage, which is then unaffordable.
It's only the farm workers who are directly affected because the 16% increase in the minimum wage only applies to them. Workers in the rest of the agricultural value chain aren't affected. Agri-SA wants the government to take a different approach.
Government need to relax the onerous compliance measures that are built into, one, labor laws, secondly, into the national minimum wage, and also other laws that might have an impact on the profitability of the agriculture sector.
South Africa's unemployment rate is 32.5%, and Agri-SA says that tackling that should be the focus.
Our first priority now should be to get everyone into a job as soon as possible. Unemployment is the biggest driver of poverty, and we've seen rising poverty in rural areas all over South Africa.
It's all about the minimum wage. It's also about profitability of those commercial farms. So it's important that there's a compromise found. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, when Nigeria's commercial city Lagos imposed a lockdown, Ruth Oladimeji saw an opportunity to earn extra money. With people unable to visit banks, she decided to become an agent providing banking services in her community. Mobile money firms have increased agent numbers to meet rising demand for financial services at a time when inflation and high unemployment have pushed Nigerians to seek work.
Civil servant Ruth Oladimeji saw a way to earn extra money when Nigeria's megacity Lagos imposed a lockdown last year. Ruth signed up with MoneyPoint, a mobile money service.
It has increased my standard of living. It has made my family, that is my daddy's side, my mother's side, it has given me much respect. So it has helped me to be able to support people financially.
Ruth has set up 6 kiosks in her community in just under a year, and she now earns more than $160 every day in a country where most people live on less than $2 a day. Mobile money firms across Africa are ramping up plans to bring banking to millions of people across the continent.
Demand has increased because of the influx of people coming into agency banking, and with that demand we've literally grown like 900% in the industry. We've had like $3.9 billion in transaction revenue processed since the pandemic, and then we've also grown our agents by, I think we have around 50,000 agents now across the country.
Firms in Nigeria say they have ramped up the number of agents to meet demand.
People could not go to the banks. Naturally, the agency business then also increased because more and more people knew that, oh, I could then offer this type of service. I could become an agent for a bank since we can't go to the banks. And the banks, when they had to operated skeletally, they had shorter closing periods, and it just became necessary to have somebody in your neighborhood who could help you to access financial services.
Although the preference for cash is deeply entrenched in Nigeria, just like other parts of Africa, the imposed COVID-19 safety protocols have created room for diversification of financial services.
I like coming to an agent because it is very close to my house. And I also don't like going to the bank because of the crowd. And ever since when I've been using this agent, it has been very, their service has been very, very good.
The last national representative survey conducted in 2019 showed that only 3.3% of Nigerian adults reported having mobile money accounts.
Since I see myself to have developed into a microfinance business, though I'll still be doing my agency banking, but I believe it would have grown to that extent of being a microfinance, maybe in a locality. A microfinance in a locality helping people to finance, getting their daily savings.
Financial experts say there has been a steady increase in digital and mobile financial services driven by the pandemic, and this has created room for success of fintech firms such as local startup Paystack, which was bought by US payment company Strip for $200 million last year. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Well, here's what's coming up in the sport. Tunisian football clubs look for alternative ways to raise revenue during the pandemic cash crunch.